What the hell is he? He muttered in terror. Ash finally finished his torment of the three boys in his grasp and stopped moving his tentacle arms. When they came to a stop, the three boys were hanging limply in the tentacle's hold. They were covered in blood and their clothes were torn to pieces. If several bones were not broken, then it would have been a blessing by Arceus, which was pretty safe to say that there was no way she would ever show any kind of mercy to such horrible excuses for human beings. Ash flung his hands forward lazily and the three boys were launched from the energy tentacle's grasp and landed in a heap further down the alley, groaning in pain. Ash turned his piercing, electric blue gaze towards the one boy that he felt the most hatred for. The one who was currently straddling his Giselle. He narrowed his eyes and slowly walked forward down the alley towards the boy. The energy cloak spinning and churning violently around him as it destroyed anything it came in contact with. The boy tried to move but he felt himself rooted where he was on top of Giselle. Ash spoke in a voice that sent shivers down the spines of both the boy and Giselle. What's wrong? I thought you wanted to have her. Ash came closer and closer as the boy stared up at his doom with a look of something that transcended horror. Giselle felt something warm and wet on top of her waist and looked down at the boy's shorts. She saw a dark spot forming in his shorts and realized that he had wetted himself, and the warm and wet feeling she felt was urine. As grossed out as she was, Giselle was too focused on Ash to give thought to anything else. Ash came closer until he was standing directly over top of the boy. The swirling energy around Ash was hungrily lapping around in twisting motions, ready for its next victim. Ash looked down on the boy with an eerily calm look on his shrouded face. He lashed his arms forward as quick as lightning and the tentacles of energy wrapped themselves around the boy before he could even move. Ash jerked the boy off of Giselle, into the air and brought him as close to his energy-shrouded face as he could. He looked dead into the other boy's terrified eyes and spoke to him in a voice that sounded as though it belonged to death itself. You want to be close to her. Ash suddenly created a cloud of energy that surrounded Giselle's body as she lay where she was. It hovered over her slightly and just stayed there. Ash lifted the boy up and then flipped him around until he had the energy tentacles holding onto each of the boy's arms and legs. He suspended the boy face down until he was face to face with the wall of energy that Ash had erected over top of Giselle. Then get close. Ash bellowed as he rammed the boy down on top of the energy wall. A hissing and burning sound was heard as the energy began burning the boy badly. He screamed in agonizing pain as the energy burned through him like a blazing sun. When Ash was done, he lifted the boy's burned body above his head and then threw him onto the heap of nearly unconscious boys. He walked over to them and extended his arms again. The energy arms wrapped around each of the teens' necks and brought them all up into a kneeling position in front of Ash. They were now all in line with each other, almost like an executioner's position. They were blurry-eyed from the immense pain their bodies were experiencing and felt like their bodies were on fire. Ash stood in front of them, staring them down with a rage and hate in his eyes that made them cringe and tremble in fear. He then spoke in a voice that reverberated with a great power, almost as though his voice was mixed with someone else's. Jackson Hyson. Darius Temrin. Jonathan Allerd. Grayson Barevon. He addressed them authoritatively and with coldness in his voice. The four beat-up and broken boys widened their pained eyes in surprise. How did he know their names? Ash continued. You have wasted the lives you have been blessed with by making others' lives miserable and causing pain to all those you have come across. You are a disgrace to all of the good and kind humans of your race. No longer shall you bring torment to others. Especially not the females you seek such joy in torturing for your own sick pleasure. The energy around Ash began glowing bright. So bright that Giselle had to cover her eyes from the blinding light. The blue energy began swirling around Ash even faster until it was covering him and the other boys. He then lifted his arms up to the sides and raised them high in the air until they were above the boys' heads and angled down towards them. His eyes glowed even more as he spoke again. You have gained twisted pleasure from the eyes that you have used to strike fear into the hearts of the innocent young women that you have abused. Starting from this day forward you shall no longer cause that fear nor shall any women feel threatened by those same eyes. The tendrils of energy came down upon the boys until 2 tendrils were resting upon each of them at different areas of their bodies. One hovered in front of their eyes and the other rested near the boys' groins. Ash then spoke in an even louder and deeper voice. On this day you shall lose all that has caused women pain and you joy. I take from you your sight, so you will no longer have the pleasure of gazing upon the females that you take such joy in torturing. As soon as that was said, the tendrils of energy that were resting above the boys' eyes fell down upon them. A loud hissing sound, followed by a bright glow and preceded by smoke, came from the boys' eyes as they screamed in agony. Ash yelled out over the screams of pain. I also take from you all that makes you men in your own right. The privilege of reproduction and the gift to make pleasure with the company of a woman will now be foreign to you. Never again shall you feel the pleasures of intimate contact with the opposite sex. Shall you ever again try, you will find that you are incapable of feeling such pleasures. No one will be able to pleasure you, nor will you be able to pleasure yourself. The physical joining between male and female is and will always be the most treasured experience between two who are bonded. An act of which you have done nothing but desecrate. At those words the tendrils of energy shot forward and seemed to pass straight through the groins of the boys, much to their horror and complete disbelief. Their looks of bewilderment quickly changed to ones of pure and unmatched agony as a burning pain, like a wildfire, was set to the inside of their loins and spread throughout their bodies like an unstoppable force. As the boys screamed in agony, Ash stretched his arms out further. On this day you have been stripped of what gives meaning to your lives. Never shall you know the familiarity of their graces again lest you spend the rest of your lives atoning for the crimes you have committed. Just as the tendrils of energy exited from the bodies of the boys, Ash clapped his hands above his head and a loud clap of thunder was heard overhead, even though there was not a cloud in the sky. Ash said loudly while his hands were still raised above his head. Such is the judgment and commandment of Arceus. So shall it be done. Mature scene end. Ash then lowered his hands to his sides and shut his eyes. The boys had immediately passed out from pain shortly before the tendrils left their bodies. The energy field that was covering Giselle fell away as she slowly stood up. She looked at Ash warily as he was turned away from her so she couldn't see him. The energy was still swirling around him but it was more controlled now. The tendrils of energy slowly receded and the wind died down. The atmosphere lightened up a little and breathing became easier. Giselle took a deep breath for courage and then walked forward slowly, completely ignoring the fact that her shirt was still twisted up above her neck and her bra was out of place and a bit askew from when she was felt up by that brown-headed bastard. She stood a few feet behind Ash now and hesitantly called out to him. Ash. His head slowly rose up and he ever so slightly turned his head to look at her. She stepped a little closer. Ash. Please turn around and face me. She said with uneasiness in her voice. Ash slowly turned around to face her. When he was finally facing her she noticed that his were still glowing blue, only it was very faint and his eyes were unfocused, almost unstaring. Giselle walked forward slowly until she was only a few inches from him. The strange, shocking and burning sensation from being this close to his energy cloak made her skin tingle. She hesitated for a few moments and then stilled herself before ever so carefully reaching her hand out and placing it softly on his cheek. Ash tensed up at the contact for a second, but upon recognizing the soft skin on his cheek he relaxed. Giselle noticed Ash start to relax at her touch, only her touch, and smiled slightly as she stepped right in front of Ash until their bodies nearly touched and placed her other hand on his other cheek. She continued to smile softly as she stroked his cheeks comfortingly and brought his face close to hers until their foreheads nearly touched. She looked into his eyes and saw that they were starting to turn back to normal as the energy surrounding him slightly began to fade. Near the entrance of the alley, Pikachu suddenly appeared again with Brock and Misty in tow. Upon seeing Ash cloaked in the familiar energy that was now receding and Giselle standing there with her shirt hiked up and her breasts nearly popped out of her bra, holding onto Ash's cheeks with her forehead nearly pressed against his, not to mention that there were 4 unconscious boys a few feet away. They knew that something had definitely happened. Pikachu said, worried for his trainer. What the? Misty said in shock. Brock shook his head. Something big must have happened. He answered her. Misty made to run over to them, but Brock held her back. Let Giselle take care of this, Misty. We just need to stay here and see what happens. He advised her. She looked torn for a few seconds but eventually just nodded her head and stepped back. Ash's eyes slowly closed and then Giselle saw something that shocked her. Tears began forming behind his closed eyelids and started falling down his cheeks. She looked concerned and tightened her hold on his cheeks. Ash, she said softly. He didn't respond and just kept his eyes closed as more tears fell down his face. Giselle was very concerned. Never before had she seen Ash actually cry. Ash, please talk to me, what's wrong? She asked as she continued to stoke his cheeks comfortingly. He just shook his head and mumbled for the first time in his own voice since he changed. Couldn't save you. Wasn't quick enough. I'm sorry. He croaked out. Giselle barely heard him, but when she was sure she did hear him correctly, she said gently. Ash, please open your eyes and look at me. It took a few moments, but Ash finally opened his eyes and looked at her. She was extremely relieved to see that his eyes were now completely back to normal. In fact, she was very happy to see that energy surrounding Ash was slowly starting to fade away completely. She looked into Ash's eyes and then reached up and wiped the tears that were collected there away with her hand. Ash, she said softly. What do you mean you weren't quick enough? She asked, confused. Ash started to feel wobbly from the after effects of his change and grabbed onto Giselle as he slowly started falling to the ground. She grabbed a hold of his shoulders and helped down until he was kneeling. She placed her hands under his neck and looked back into his eyes again. Please talk to me, Ash. She urged him gently. He took a deep breath. If I would have been faster. If I wouldn't have left you alone. None of this would have happened to you, and those bastards would have never did anything to you. I should have known they would have tried something after how they were acting at the contest. He scolded himself in a creaking voice as the energy around him started to pick back up again. Giselle quickly pulled him closer to her and tightened her hold on him. She put her forehead against his and rubbed his neck soothingly while speaking to him softly with as much affection as she could put into her words. Ash, it's not your fault. Those monsters took me because they wanted to, and they wouldn't have stopped until they did. You made it to me and saved me before they could. She choked on her next words. Before they could do anything really bad to me. You were my knight in shining armor, Ash. You showed up when I needed you the most and you protected me. You didn't just protect me, you made them pay for what they did to me, and you assured that they would never do anything like that ever again to any other girls. She looked into his eyes deeply as he stared back at her with wide eyes. You're my hero, Ash. You showed me just how much you cared for me today, and it's beyond words how amazing I feel right now because of it, so please. Don't feel bad for being my savior and the one person that I know will always come for me. She said with tears in her eyes as well. Ash, who by this time had completely returned to normal, took Giselle's cheeks in his hands and stroked them tenderly. I was so afraid that I might have lost you, Giselle. He said as he stared at her with such tenderness and affection it made her blush. I'm not going anywhere, Ash, you need me too much. She joked. Ash laughed and touched his forehead to hers. I don't have a problem admitting that as long as you admit that you can't resist my charm. He told her with smug grin on his face, his voice and personality finally returning to normal. She slapped him on the arm playfully. I'm being serious, funny guy. She scolded him teasingly. He wrapped his arms around her waist. So am I, he said smiling. She wrapped her arms around his neck. No more talk, Ketchum, just kiss me already. She commanded him. He smiled and nodded his head. Yes, ma'am. They then leaned in at the same time and merged their lips together in a soft and sweet kiss. The gentle pushing and pulling of each other's lips as they kissed was the only thing they were focused on at that moment. They continued to kiss for a few minutes until Giselle shivered. Ash broke away from her and then looked at his girlfriend in concern. What's wrong? He asked her worriedly. I'm cold, she said, shivering. Ash seemed confused. It was a warm day, why was she? That's when he looked down and saw her current state of undress. His eyes bugged out and he coughed as he turned away. Giselle, you might want to fix your clothes, he said, blushing. Giselle looked down confused and saw that her clothes were still disheveled from when she was attacked. Her shirt was lifted above her neck, exposing her black bra, which was slightly lopsided. She turned dark red and then fixed herself quickly. Once she was done, she walked over and picked her discarded jacket back up. Ash turned to face her again and rubbed the back of his head nervously. Sorry, Giselle. I didn't see anything though, I promise, he assured her. She just shrugged her shoulders and took Ash's hand. It's okay, Ash, I know you wouldn't be disrespectful like that and gawk at me. Thank you for telling me though, she said, smiling at him. Ash just smiled back and kissed her hand. Anytime, milady, he said with a mocking proper tone to his voice. Giselle giggled and then she and Ash heard footsteps in the alley. They looked up and saw Brock, Misty and Pikachu coming toward them. Ash, Giselle, Misty shouted as she ran up to them. Are you two all right? We saw a little of what happened but not all of it. Yeah, you had us worried, Brock said as he caught up to Misty and stood facing them. Pika Pie, Pikachu said as he hopped up on Ash's shoulder. He scratched his Pokémon under the chin and smiled. Did you bring them here, buddy? Ash asked his Pokémon. Pikachu nodded. Pikachu. Ash turned back to his friends. I'm sorry we worried you guys, he apologized. Misty just shook her head. Never mind that, Ash. Tell us what happened, she urged. Ash sighed and then stood up slowly with Giselle's help. His body felt like it had just been used as a personal punching bag for a fighting-type champion. He then went on and explained what had happened to his friends. Brock and Misty listened as their eyes grew wider as he went on. By the time he finished, they were in a state of shock. You actually took away those things from those guys? Misty asked, amazed. Ash just shrugged and scratched his cheek. Well, I don't think it was necessarily me. It was just like what happened with Damien. Some other outside force was responsible. He didn't bother telling them that he knew it was Arceus. He still didn't feel the time was right to tell them about something so life-changing yet. Well, at least you guys are safe, Brock said, patting Ash on the back. Yeah, we were afraid something might have happened to you too, Misty said with relief clear in her voice. Ash nodded and then looked at his X-transceiver. It'll be time for the tournament to start soon, guys, let's get going, he said. Brock pointed to the unconscious boys further down the alley. What about them? He asked. Ash just narrowed his eyes and subconsciously drew Giselle closer to him protectively. Leave them. They'll be in for a very rude awakening when they wake up, he said with a dark grin on his face. Brock just nodded in understanding and then after a few moments of silence suddenly snapped his fingers in remembrance and then took the bag that he had slung over his shoulder off. He handed it to Giselle. Here you go, Giselle, I found this back at the changing rooms, he said as Giselle took it. She looked at the bag and then back at Brock. Thank you so much, Brock, I really appreciate it, she said gratefully. The teen just shrugged. Anytime, Giselle. We're just glad you're safe and sound, Misty chimed in. Yeah, Giselle, we really are glad that you're okay, she said sincerely. Giselle smiled at her friends. Thanks a lot, you two, it really means a lot knowing that you care so much. Brock and Misty returned the smile and just as Giselle went to sling the bag over her shoulder, Ash grabbed it from her and hoisted over his own shoulder. She looked at him in confusion and he offered a small smile. Ladies don't carry their own bags, that is what we gentlemen are for, he said. Giselle kissed his cheek. Thank you very much, Ash. Your mother really did raise you right. He blushed a little in gratitude and then said aloud. Come on, guys, let's get going. But slow, please, my body feels drained as hell. He sighed tiredly. The four friends then took off and headed back towards the beach and Ash's competition. XXXXXXXXXX. After Ash and his friends made it back to the stage where the tournament was going to take place, they were instantly barraged by an assault of questions from Delia. After Ash had managed to calm her down and assure his mother that everything was fine, he told Delia that Giselle was feeling a little ill from the after-contest jitters she had, so the two of them went for a walk down the beach to help her feel better. He apologized to her, and after another bone-breaking hug she was okay. Ash then went to join the other competitors backstage so he could prepare himself. Really, he just needed to sit down for a little bit and recover after his episode, and since only one person was allowed back with him, Giselle was the one he chose. She just sat with him for a while with his head in her lap while she soothingly rubbed her fingers through his hair and let him rest and center his mind from all of the churning emotions he still had swirling inside of him. After he was called up, he kissed her goodbye and then went to join the other trainers for the start of the competition. The judge for the contest thanked everyone for coming and then turned on a giant TV screen above the stage that showed the matchups for the tournament. After the introductions were complete and the matchups were decided, the tournament began. Ash and Pikachu blew through each and every round they entered in with a deadly calm and serious visage apparent on their faces the entire time. Apparently, Ash was still mad from what the gang of boys did to Giselle, and he was now taking all of his frustrations out in the tournament. They had fought 5 rounds so far and had made into the final match of the tournament. The 3 hours of battling now finally coming to a close. The first opponent they faced was against a young boy and his Raticate. Pikachu ended the battle with one quick attack. The second battle was against an older boy in his teens who was using a Fearow. After some well-timed tactics and strategy, Pikachu ended the battle with an iron tail to the head when the Pokémon came flying in low to attack Pikachu. The third match was against an old woman who used a Drowsy. This match was tougher since it was a psychic type, but with speed, maneuverability and a well-executed Thunderbolt, they won hands down. Match 4 was against a young woman who used a Flareon. This was all about speed and precision. After dodging several hot fire attacks, Pikachu ended the match with an agility double team Iron Tail combo. The fifth match was against a man dressed like a fisherman who used a Golduck. This match was the toughest and caused Pikachu to use speed, agility and fluidity in his moves to avoid Golduck's water and fighting type moves. He ended the match by fooling Golduck into wetting the entire stage under their feet with its water attacks. Afterwards, Pikachu finished it with a Thunderbolt that arced its way through the water until it found Golduck and then a powerful Mega Punch right to Golduck's head. Ash was supposed to be facing an older gentleman for the final round of the tournament, and currently, he was sitting with his family and friends backstage during a 30-minute interval. "You've done a great job so far, Ash, just keep it up." Brock encouraged his friend. "Yes honey, you've done so well and I'm so proud of you." Delia gushed over her son, making Ash blush in the process. "Mom," he said exasperatedly. Professor Oak chuckled. "You really have done a splendid job up to now, Ash, you should be proud of yourself." He praised his student. "Yes young man, just keep giving it your all and you'll win the tournament." Mo chimed in. "Yeah Ash, keep the focus and beat down your next opponent." Misty encouraged. Giselle took his hand. "I know you'll win and that's all there is to it," she said firmly. Ash smiled at all of the people who were supporting him and nodded his head. "Thanks guys, me and Pikachu are going to win. Right buddy?" he said looking at Pikachu. Pikachu raised his fist in the air. "Pika," he said confidently. XXXXXXXXXX. Meanwhile, sitting at table in a small snack stand set up on the beach just for the occasion, near the stage itself, was none than Brutella. She was flanked by her usual 2 bodyguards, and standing behind them, huddled up close together, was Jessie, James and Meowth. Brutella was sitting with her elbows leaning on the table and her fingers crossed. "This is not good," she said in her annoying voice. "Those brats working for Mo has won every competition so far and have earned quite a bit of prize money in the process. If that last brat wins this tournament, then that old bum will have more than enough money to pay me back. If that happens, then I'll never own the property his worthless restaurant is sitting on," she said as she slammed her fists onto the table. And judging by that boy's next opponent, he's going to win for sure. She seethed. If only he had another, more powerful opponent. Suddenly she stopped and whipped around to face the three rockets. That's it, she yelled, pointing at them. Who? Us. James said, pointing to himself stupidly. Brutella nodded her head. Yes, you three. I know exactly how we can stop that brat from winning. How? The rockets asked together. She smirked. You three are from Team Rocket, right? She demanded. They nodded their heads in reply. Brutella smirked wider. Then that means you must have very strong Pokémon on you that could easily beat that boy's pathetic little Pikachu. She said like it was obvious. James was about to tell her the truth, how they had no strong Pokémon and were in fact, on the bottom of the pile when it came to Team Rocket, but Jessie stopped him with an elbow to his ribs. Why yes, of course that's true, Brutella. We're actually quite feared, even within our own organization. She lied through her teeth. Brutella grinned evilly again. Wonderful. So here is what you'll do. Sabotage that other competitor so they can't compete and then take their place against that brat in the finals. Understand? She ordered. The three teammates bowed their heads. Yes, ma'am, they said together. Brutella nodded in satisfaction. Good. If you succeed with this, then I'll release you from my service and you will have repaid your damages by helping me claim Moe's restaurant and property for myself. However, she fixed them with a hard glare. If you fail, then I will tell the police all about the three of you, have you arrested and sent away to prison for being members of Team Rocket. She threatened them with a fierce look on her haggard face. The three fools gulped and nodded their heads in understanding. Brutella grinned again. Good. Now get going, she commanded. They bowed their heads and then took off towards the stage. Brutella sat back down at the table and chuckled evilly to herself. She knew that soon, Moe's restaurant and everything else he had would be hers. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Half an hour later, Ash was standing back up on the stage in front of the large beach crowd, ready to win the tournament and help Moe pay back the horrible business bitch Brutella. Pikachu was on Ash's shoulder, waiting for his trainer to call him onto the field. Ash looked across the stage at where his opponent was supposed to be and was shocked to see who came walking out from behind the stage a few minutes later. Jessie! He shouted in anger and surprise. The woman in front of him was definitely Jessie from Team Rocket, and behind her, standing down on the ground looking up at the stage, were James and Meowth. They were all dressed in tourist beach clothes so that no one would know their affiliation with Team Rocket by seeing their outfits, and had even wore hats and sunglasses to cover their hair and eyes up. The disguises were very convincing and everyone else from the crowd most likely would have never expected the three of them to be from Team Rocket. Ash, however, was no fool. He could tell by the green baubles dangling from Jessie's ears and the bit of red hair poking out from under the sun hat she was wearing who it was. Of course, even if Ash wasn't so observant, it wouldn't have mattered. Anyone that had encountered a group of people that ran around with a Meowth that walked on two legs and talked like a person would have to know who it was just by singling him out. That tail was impossible to hide, and so were the whiskers. Also, no human was that short, save a child. Perhaps if this was an alternate universe or a fantasy world and Ash was just some dense idiot who made the simplest mistakes, never noticed girls who were clearly into him like his now girlfriend Giselle, didn't understand a thing about truly training his Pokémon, never learned and retained valuable life lessons, and never noticed the obvious things in life, then things would be different. However, that wasn't the reality here. This was the real world, not some show or what were those things that kids Ash's age, older and even some adults like to read? Manga. Yes, that was it, manga. This wasn't some manga or anime show, what people nowadays had taken to calling animated TV shows. Ash was a damn smart person and a well-versed trainer that would take much more than some cheap disguises to ever fool him. Jessie smirked and flipped her hair. The one and only twerp. Ash growled. What are you three even doing here? You didn't win your way up here into the final round. You didn't even participate in the contest. He shouted, pointing an accusing finger at her. Jessie just flashed him an innocent look. Well, of course I did, twerp. How else do you think I was able to enter this contest in the first place? Cheat. I would be insulted if you would even begin to think something so horrible of me. She said with mock hurt in her voice. Ash just straightened up and fixed her with a hard glare. Fine. I don't know how you managed to cheat your way into the final round, but either way. If you really want to battle me, then so be it. I'll show you just how horribly wrong your misguided cocky attitude really is. You and James are cruel, insensitive people and horrible trainers to your Pokémon. You will never be able to bring out their potential unless you change and start showing them the love, caring, compassion and understanding that Pokémon need in order to grow strong and healthy. He narrowed his eyes at the woman. You need to see the bond between trainer and Pokémon firsthand, and I'll gladly show that to you. Jessie just laughed. If you think you can, little boy. James and Meowth aren't holding me back this time, so you are going to be dealing with a whole new Jessie. She boasted. Hey! James and Meowth yelled at the same time. Jessie looked down at them. Shut up, she said harshly. Ash yelled over to her. Before we begin, just tell me one thing. She raised an eyebrow. And that it is. Ash crossed his arms. Just what did you three do to my actual opponent? The elderly man. You better not have hurt him. Ash said in a low and threatening voice. Jessie laughed again. I still don't know what you're talking about, twerp. But if I could guess, then I would say he's probably taking a nice nap somewhere. He is old after all, if what you say is true. However, there is no old man because I am your opponent. She said, pulling out a Pokeball. Ash narrowed his eyes again. He knew that Team Rocket did something to the older man he was supposed to battle. He just hoped that the man was okay. XXXXXXXXXXX. In between two small clothing stores that were on the main street right in front of the beach, in a large dumpster, was an old man tied up and gagged, lying in the garbage. A young man came walking out of one of the stores wearing a uniform with his name tag, showing he was an employee, with a bag of trash in his hand. He lifted up the dumpster to toss in the bag only to gasp when he saw the old man lying inside of the dumpster, wiggling around in his binds. The young man threw down the bag he was holding and carefully helped the old man out. After untying him and removing the gag from his mouth, he asked him, Sir, are you okay? The old man just shook his head and coughed. No cough, I was kidnapped by Team Wee's rocket. The young man gasped again. What? Where? He asked with wide eyes. The old man, who had regained his breath fully, answered. Down at the beach where the contests are being held. I was battling in the finals of the battle tournament against some boy, and when I was preparing myself for the battle, these three people, well. One was a Pokémon, and he could talk too. He shook his head. I'm sorry. Anyway, the man and woman were dressed in white uniforms that held the symbol for Team Rocket on them, and they cornered me. While I was preoccupied with the man and woman, the Pokémon came up behind me and knocked me unconscious. All I remember is waking up inside of this dumpster a little while ago before you found me. The younger man looked around a few times and then helped the old man to his feet. We have to call the police, sir, and tell them what happened. He urged. The old man nodded vigorously. Yes, and tell them to head down to the beach. I don't know why those three rockets wanted to battle that young man so badly, but it can't be good. The store clerk nodded. I'll call the police now, sir. You should head down to where the tournament is being held. You'll need to be there so the police can get you to identify them in case they are in disguise now. The old man nodded and then made his way as fast as his old legs could take him towards the beach, while the clerk went inside and called the police. XXXXXXXXXX. The referee for the match stepped up and looked between Ash and Jessie. This is the final match of the Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament. It will be between Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town and Jessie of Celadon City. Not her real hometown, obviously. Trainers ready? He asked them loudly. They merely nodded at one another, and then the ref held his hands out. Then please choose your Pokémon. Jessie threw forth her Pokeball. Arbok, destroy this little twerp, she shouted. As the large snake appeared out of its Pokeball, Ash raised his eyebrows. So your Ekans evolved, huh? He questioned her. Jessie just smirked. When you're forced to float on the back of your Pokémon, who's not a water type, in the ocean for more than a day, then they are usually going to have to evolve because of the stress it puts on them. She said, trying to sound smart. It's about time too. He was too weak to be worth anything as an Ekans. James's coughing evolved as well. Maybe now they won't be so worthless. Ash glared at her disgustedly. I've heard enough of you, Jessie. I'm not going to waste any more time talking to you. No. I'm going to let Pikachu do that for me in our battle. So let's go. On cue, Pikachu jumped off of his shoulder and stood facing Arbok with a calm but serious look on his face. Jessie laughed. I'll show you and that rodent kid. The referee brought his hands down. Begin. Jessie quickly commanded Arbok. Use Poison Sting. Ash stayed calm. Pikachu, you don't need me for this battle. Go with your instincts. Pikachu nodded and then vaulted out of the way of the attack. Jessie yelled out. Again Arbok. Don't stop until you hit that little rat. Arbok continued to launch Poison Sting after Poison Sting at Pikachu, only for the little mouse to gracefully dodge each attack. All the while Pikachu kept getting closer. Jessie became frustrated. Arg. Arbok used Glare and stopped that runt in his tracks. She commanded. She smirked. There was no way Pikachu could dodge Glare. Ash remained true to his word and didn't say anything. Curious as to how Pikachu would dodge such an attack. Pikachu didn't disappoint. He used agility and boosted his speed as he jumped in the air and launched himself towards Arbok. He wrapped his tail around his eyes so he wouldn't become affected by Glare and then smashed into the snake hard with his head. While he fell forward and Arbok fell back, Pikachu unfurled his tail since Arbok's Glare was broken. He swung his tail down on top of Arbok's head hard and smashed the Pokémon into the ground. Pikachu hopped back and watched as Arbok lay there struggling to get up after getting pummeled with Iron Tail. Jessie became red-faced and shouted at her Pokémon. Arbok, get up already and fight. Arbok slowly wobbled back to its tail and looked at where Pikachu last was. However, both Arbok and Jessie went wide-eyed when they saw that Arbok was now surrounded by several Pikachu in a tight circle. He had used double team while Arbok was down. All of the Pikachu began running in a circle around the snake as fast they could with agility. Arbok started spinning its head around and became dizzy. Jessie shouted out. Arbok, use Poison Sting until you hit the right one. Arbok began firing Poison Sting at all of the Pikachu, but they were too fast and almost every poison barb missed its mark. When a few started to make contact with the Pikachu copies and make them vanish, the real Pikachu suddenly broke the running circle and vaulted over top of Arbok in a sideways flip. He landed beside Arbok and then hit the Pokémon in the side with quick attack, launching it back towards Jessie. Pikachu didn't rest and then used Thunderbolt on the now downed snake. The bolt struck and began electrocuting the Pokémon viciously. Eventually the bolt exploded and Arbok was sent careening into Jessie, who flew off of the stage and then struck James and Meowth, tangling all four of them up in a heap. The referee waited until the small dust cloud cleared, and when it did he saw that Arbok was lying on top of Jessie unconscious. He raised his hand in the air and pointed towards Ash and Pikachu, who had resumed his place beside Ash. Since Arbok is unable to battle, I hereby declare the winner of this match and the Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament to be Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town and his Pikachu. The crowd cheered loudly in applause, especially Ash's friends and family. Even Mo was clapping loudly. Ash let Pikachu jump into his arms and hugged his Pokémon. You were great, Pikachu. He praised his Pokémon. Pika Pai Pikachu. Pikachu said happily from Ash's arms. The coordinator of the beach events, a man in a black suit with black, slicked down hair, came out onto the stage holding a microphone. He came up and stood beside Ash as he spoke into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you this year's Port Vista Beach Battle Tournament winner, Ash Ketchum. The crowd cheered loudly again as the man turned to Ash. Congratulations on winning the tournament, young man. He said with a smile. For being this year's winner, you not only win the big cash prize of 20,000 Pokécredits. You and 3 other people of your choice get a free 1-week stay at the luxurious Watercrown Hotel that has just been built at the large coastal city Hutber Port, which is only a day's travel from here. The resort is currently being constructed over top of the beautiful Hutber coral reefs, but the hotel is up and running. Congratulations again. The coordinator said as he motioned for someone with his hand. Out from the back of the stage came two attractive young women dressed in bikinis, holding a giant check. When Brock saw the young women, he instantly went into super pervert mode. NNNNNNNNN. Somewhere in another dimension, a white-haired man who was spying on some young women in a bathhouse sneezed. What's that? I have the strange feeling that another has proclaimed themselves a super pervert. There is only one, and that is the great Gier. That was as far as the man got. The young women heard the pervert's loud outburst and busted out of the bathhouse wrapped in towels. When they saw the old man sitting near a board of the bathhouse that had a hole in it, the women shouted at the same time, "Hentei." The only sounds that could be heard after that was the sound of breaking bones and the screams of pain from the real super pervert. After they were done beating the old man and left him laying there broken and bloody, he raised his hand in the air. Damn. You wannabe super pervert. He choked out before falling unconscious. NNNNNNNNNN. Brock went to lunge for the stage and was pulled back by the ear by Misty. Not the time, Brock, she said as she pulled him away by said ear. It's never the time, Misty. Brock whined. Exactly. Misty shouted in anger as she continued to drag him away. Back up on the stage, the young women handed the check to Ash and then kissed him on the cheek, one on each side, then winking at him before going to stand behind the large check. Ash looked down at Giselle nervously, afraid she was going to be upset at two women kissing and winking at him. She just looked back up at him and giggled at his nervous look. She shook her head and mouthed the words to him, "It's okay, Ash. I know who you belong to just as much as you do. I'm not upset. Now stop looking like a fool." Ash smiled back at his truly amazing girlfriend and then turned back to the coordinator. The man and Ash posed for the news crew that had just arrived since they wanted a picture for the local paper. They posed so that they were shaking hands, looking at the camera and holding the check in such a way that it looked like the coordinator of the event was handing it to Ash. After that was done, the coordinator had the check taken away and then gave Ash a card that had the actual prize money on it before congratulating him again and then making his way off the stage. However, he didn't get far. Neither did any of the people in the crowd who was starting to leave either. Brutella suddenly stormed up onto the stage, trailed by her two bodyguards, and stopped the event coordinator with a raised hand. "Stop!" she screeched loudly. The man looked taken aback and raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, ma'am?" he asked in a confused tone. She pointed at Ash. "That boy didn't win this tournament fair and square. He and his opponent were in league with each other. She threw the tournament so they could split the prize money," she accused. Ash looked outraged. "What?" he yelled at her. The event coordinator looked at Ash and then down at where Jesse and the other Rockets were just now getting untangled from one another. Brutella pressed on. "Not to mention, those three are with Team Rocket and he is in cahoots with them. They're criminals." The coordinator looked torn and confused while Ash's friends and family down off the side of the stage looked enraged. "That's a complete lie," Misty spat out with venom in her voice. The others nodded their heads in agreement, just as angry. Mo then said grimly, "Brutella is trying to stop Ash from keeping the prize money and winning the tournament as much as she can. She knows that the prize money from Ash's win will be more than enough for me to pay her back, combined with what you three kids also won. She'll lie and try anything else she can to keep me from keeping my restaurant. That horrible old witch." Giselle spat. Up on the stage, Ash was fuming with anger. "I am not associated with Team Rocket in any way, shape or form." The three Rockets, who had by now untangled themselves from each other, ran up onto the stage as fast as they could and surrounded the event coordinator. "We aren't involved with Team Rocket either, sir," Jessie said with a smile on her face. "We would never be involved with such a horrid organization. Right, James?" she asked her partner. James nodded vigorously. "That's right, mister. We would never be involved with such terrible people," he said with a smile also plastered across his face. "Yeah, that old woman's just telling lies," Meowth chimed in. The coordinator looked like he was having an internal battle of who to believe until Brutella looked at her bodyguards and gestured towards Team Rocket. They got the message and walked up to the groveling trio. They pulled them away from the event coordinator and then, much to the Rocket's protests and struggles, stripped them of their beach tourist disguises, exposing their Team Rocket uniforms underneath. Brutella pointed at them. See? I told you they were members of Team Rocket. That boy is also involved with them. I wasn't lying about any of it. She said, grinning wickedly. The coordinator was now very suspicious. Brutella wasn't lying about Team Rocket, so what if she wasn't lying about Ash being involved with them either? Before anything else could be said or done, they suddenly heard someone shout out loudly to them. Wait. They all turned their heads and saw an old man come running up onto the stage with Officer Jenny and several other officers right behind her. He ran up to the event coordinator while the police stayed back a bit. Sir, please wait. I can personally guarantee you that anything that woman is saying is a lie and that this boy is innocent. The old man said desperately. The coordinator looked at the newcomer with confusion etched onto his face, while Brutella looked mad at the man's audacity to call her a liar, even though it was true, and Ash looked even more confused at this strange man's willingness to help him. The coordinator just shook his head. Please, mister, I would be grateful if you could help me make sense of this situation because right now, I'm horribly confused. The old man nodded and began. I can tell you here and now that this woman is a liar. He said, pointing at Brutella. I was really the one that was supposed to be this young man's opponent in the final round of the tournament. Those three criminals. He pointed at Jesse, James and Meowth. Knocked me unconscious, kidnapped me and then tied me up before throwing me in a dumpster not far from here. A kind young man who worked at one of the stores where I was at found me and helped me out from that dreadful waste bin and untied me. Afterwards he called the police while I made my way here as fast as I could so I would be able to warn you about this woman and those three rockets. The coordinator grew wide-eyed at hearing this and looked between Brutella and Team Rocket, while Ash looked outraged at hearing what Brutella ordered Team Rocket to do to his real opponent. The old woman just smirked and cackled at the old man. Such a wonderful story, dear sir, but tell me. Where is your proof? She said smugly. The old man just frowned and looked down. I have none. But I'm telling you it's the truth. He insisted. The event coordinator just sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm supposed to be believing a lot of things today apparently. He said exasperatedly. Brutella walked up and pushed the old man out of the way. Look, you have three criminals of a very wanted organization right there. She pointed at the three rockets. Arrest them. If you can't believe what I'm telling you about this boy. She looked at Ash, who was glaring at her. Then I suggest you call off of this tournament so that no one wins, unfairly, and no more confusion is brought up from this terrible situation. The coordinator just looked around uncertainly and then sighed again. Maybe you're right, he admitted. Brutella smiled darkly to herself. It was all coming together. Jesse looked beyond furious and shouted out loudly. You traitorous old hag. You'll pay for selling us out. She threatened. Brutella sneered. I have no idea what you're talking about, criminal, we've never met. Down off the side of the stage, Ash's friends, family and Mo had heard every word of what was going on and they all looked furious, especially Mo, and in that moment Giselle had enough. She climbed up onto the stage and took off running to where Ash was at. She finally made it to his side and looked at him. He looked furious at everything Brutella had done and was glaring daggers at her. Giselle looked at Brutella with anger blazing in her eyes. You're a horrible old woman. Don't you feel any shame at all for the things you did? Why would you want to ruin our and Ash's attempts to win enough prize money that Mo could then use to pay you back with? Isn't that what matters to you? Getting back your filthy money? She shouted. Brutella looked furious at being scolded for her actions like a child from some young girl and stomped towards Giselle. The girl backed away until she was standing right in front of the event coordinator. Brutella got up in her face, an amazing feat considering how short she was. Stupid girl. She hissed, completely ignoring that they were right in front of the coordinator. She was so angry. I never cared about that old fool Mo paying me back. That was just a ruse. His dingy little restaurant sits on prime location for where a hotel could go. Beachfront and right near the heart of the city, it's perfect. I was banking on the fact that he would never be able to pay me back, so I could then take his restaurant and property as payment and bulldoze it to the ground and build my own 5-star hotel on the site and make millions. I knew he would never be able to pay me back any large amount of money with the little bit